Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Music Lab podcast. My name is Dogg, and I'm here with Travis and Daniel from Deep Sleep Atlantic. Welcome, guys. How we doing?
Hey, man.
Hey Chad, how's it going?
Very well, very well. It is a pleasure to have you guys on. I know it's early in the morning, so we'll try and make this as painless as possible. So I want to talk first of all. Let's talk about the name of the band, Deep Sleep Atlantic. A unique name for a band. Give us the history of it.
So there's really no like deep, meaningful thing behind it. We were experimenting with some other names. We actually had decided to go with a different name.
Okay.
And upon doing a little bit of research, once we decided we were going to start getting out there, it came to our attention that somebody else was already using that name. So we kind of retracted, we pulled back a little, try to regroup. And basically, band names are really tough because
there's so many.
Living in a time where it's like everything's taken. And so, I'm writing everything down that I can think of, and Daniel's sending me some ideas by WhatsApping each other and stuff like that. And then the one day, I can't remember exactly the details, but the one day I'm like, Deep Sleep Atlantic. I love the idea of Atlantic, covered a certain part of the world. I was like, deep sleep. And I started to think, well, we're in this real woke movement kind of thing. I don't know if we can play on that. Not that I wanted to either, but then I was like, well, Deep Sleep Atlantic, we could always like somehow play it into like, there's so many different subjects that have become so sensitive and so offensive to so many people that while one half of the world seems to feel super woke or entitled to that, and the other half maybe doesn't, or there's people in this part that feel that way and they're in the wrong locations or whatever it is. And I started to think, well, maybe that's the whole vibe, like maybe we'll go with Deep Sleep Atlantic and like, we're not a political band or anything like that, but like we can maybe be those people that are like, maybe just look a little further than the surface, that kind of thing. No matter what's your point of view, just look at other people's point of view and look a little bit further than your nose, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So not the most exciting story, but that's kind of how it was. And then once I realized that the name wasn't taken, I dropped Daniel a text and I was like, we call Deep Sleep Atlantic now. And I terribly didn't even go like, it was so like, this is what it is, because it was so hard finding a name that wasn't taken. So, but I like it. The hardest part about the whole thing has been when we're doing gigs now, because we had operated as a different band for a couple months. I have to think really hard to not go, hey, we're bloody blah, and we're not that band, So
this was a unilateral decision then, the band name, it sounds like. My take on this is I thought that you named it because when you guys traveled from London to New Orleans, you crossed the Atlantic, and I'm sure you took a nap at some point. That's a long flight, right?
Yeah.
Or not at all?
Hey, it's a couple miles. Hey, so good for you. So you've done your research, huh?
Yeah. So you're from South Africa. Daniel, you're from Colombia. I mean, talk about how your influence in just being a musician is from, growing up in those countries.
Go for it, Daniel.
I mean, even though I grew up in Colombia, I kind of always, I grew up with like international music, listening to rock and grunge. And obviously, Colombian and Latin music has been always present in my life and play, a big chunk of who I am and what I am today. But I would say I mean, I just grew up like I said, just listening to international stuff, just mainly rock and grunge and kind of heavy stuff.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot throughout the years, and you know, I left Colombia many years ago, and I've been living in Europe and the UK, and now here. So just getting a little bits and pieces from everywhere I go, and just like putting it together, just to keep on rocking, man.
And what about you, Travis?
Yeah, it's a similar situation, I mean, I kind of feel like while you get exposed to these subgenres in all these different places, and maybe there's slight twists on maybe music you're familiar with in some of these different places. For me, I feel like on the grand scheme of things, the bones of all the music is the same. So like, don't get me wrong, I don't mean for that to seem like, I don't know, counterproductive or anything like that, but it's like, especially Western music, right? The way we've heard it now for the last 100 years or close to, we're using the same keys, we're using the same tempos within reason, we're using the same rules. So it's like, was there slightly different music in South Africa to England? Yes, but not that crazily different. Production was slightly better, in my opinion. I mean, production has come a very long way in South Africa since then. We're talking close to 20 years ago when I first moved. So like, it's just different styles. And what I noticed were trends. So like when I was in Johannesburg, by the time I left, there was a certain movement going on. And then when I went to England, that movement wasn't there. Like they were following a different trend.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of start to adapt if you want to. And by the time you follow in that trend, the next trend's there. So like, I don't know, it's all very similar. It just depends what mood you're in, I think.
So speaking of trends, I feel like South by Southwest is a good measuring stick of what's trending in the industry.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, female fronted rock bands and like 80s dream pop, that seemed to be like the two main kind of like all encompassing themes that were throughout, or like that's what we kind of felt like was similar. So to your point, music is cyclical. The 80s seems to be kind of on a comeback right now. You're kind of seeing that. And you're right, like technology with production has just come so far. Like it's allowing so many more bands to, kind of DIY instead of have to, wait to get into the studio and wait to, be on someone else's schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. So I got to talk about this. So the dynamic for the two of you both being drummers, that is a unique dynamic. Talk about that being, a two-piece band where you're both, drummers, or you came from being drummers.
Well, I think that for me at least, and it might feel different for Daniel, but I think that's why we hit it off so quick. I mean, I've said it in an interview or two in the past that like I was instantly attracted to Daniel's personality because of his work ethic. And, I do believe that to be true, but maybe because we had this familiar ground to relate to, maybe that made it easier because, I mean, again, not to sound like a broken record, you've mentioned already that we're immigrants, but like it's not like every immigrant just relates and becomes a friend. Like I met him and instantly felt like, hey man, this is my people, kind of thing. And so we've had a couple conversations about drums and drummers, and we do talk about feel and groove and different things that are happening in that world and stuff. But for the most part, like I mean, Daniel's an incredible musician. He doesn't just drum. And like, we both work as working drummers. And so I think we can relate a lot on that surface, but how it affects the band, not really. I mean, he's got great timing. I pride myself on my timing, and I let him do his thing because I trust him completely musically. And so I don't think about the drums when I'm playing. The greatest part about playing with a guy like him, especially having him on the drums, like, I don't have to worry. It's like, and this is no disrespect to drummers of different levels, but something happens when drummers reach a certain level. And Buddy Rich always used to say, your band's only as good as your drummer. Listen, I know that people might argue with that, but Buddy Rich was and still is probably the greatest drummer we've ever had, within maybe top 5, okay? But I truly believe that to be true, because I have played in bands where I have been a front man or a bass player or whatever it is my role was in that band. And there's been a drummer back there who maybe hasn't been that solid or tight. Musicians like that word, tight. And your band could be really good, but when you take a drummer that you can trust and you just know they're going to be on it every time and their dynamics are great, and like a drummer like Daniel, and I consider myself in the same school of drumming, okay? You would see if you came to watch us. That snare drum hits. It's like, you mentioned 80s. It's like an 80s pop record. And consistently throughout the 3 minutes, you're going to have the exact same velocity, the exact same timbre, tone, unless something breaks. If he breaks that drum, which he's more than capable of. I mean, he can hit bloody hard. But like, it's, for me as a front guy in this band, it's been a godsend, because I don't have to kind of go, hope this guy hits this thing. I trust him completely. So I don't know how it feels for him, but that's my super long-winded answer.
I love it.
First of all, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've never talked about, like, the two of us being drummers and how that affect the band at all, or it's just not. I mean, I never thought about that. We just played music,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I think, to your point about drumming, I think it is the foundation of the band, and it is the rhythm of the band, and rhythm is music. So like, to your point, I mean, if either one of those there's cracks, or it's not like at that level, yeah, I completely agree with you. So yeah, you're definitely on that. So living in New Orleans now, I've been to this city 3 or 4 times now. I love the city. What is it about New Orleans that you guys just absolutely love? And something maybe that drives you nuts too?
Go for it, dude.
I mean, New Orleans is a very special town. It's like a little bubble in the South, especially. Um, I'm not a big fan of the United States South. Like the culture. I'm not a big fan of that, but New Orleans is very special in that sense. It's very European. It's like a very multicultural city. There's plenty of things happening. There's a bit food culture down here, which is very important to me. Um, yeah, I love it. I mean, all that sense about New Orleans is pretty cool. People are super nice. They're super welcoming. Uh, but on the other hand, there's a lot of things that I kind of dislike, and one of them being the music industry itself. I think down here in New Orleans, because of the tourism and because of the way that people exploited the music and the musicians, it's a completely broken industry. There's not a music industry down here. There's a tourism industry, with a little kind of musical sub branch to it. But and that makes me very sad, you know, because the quality of the music goes down. It just become all about the money, becomes all about, you know, that it makes you feel like a little sausage in like a produce, you
Factory.
know, big company, you know. um so that's one of the reasons I kind of really and truly enjoy working in projects like this, like Deep Sleep Atlantic, because it just takes you out of that frame. It just works your way to a different spectrum, and it just works out for my ambitions and for what I want. Yeah.
And how about you, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this city has been extremely kind to me, you know, as I don't take for granted that I'm an outsider. And I sometimes have to remind myself how lucky I am to work as a musician in the city, especially coming here not knowing anybody. And, you know, there's local guys who don't work. And so when you get work and you're an outsider, I don't take that for granted, you know. Now, to Daniel's point, this tourism industry, that is a real thing. Like, listen, if you want to work every single night as a musician here, or
Yes.
twice a day, you know, you can do it. So if your only goal is to make money, hey, listen, cities like this are a dying breed. There's not many left. Maybe Austin, parts of Nashville. But I always kind of related to what I think Hollywood in the 60s, 50s, 60s must have been like. Because there's some incredible, not just some, there's buttloads of incredible musicians down here as instrumentalists, you know, I mean, like, shit, dude, like, incredible. And I haven't obviously spoken with all of them, but I think, and this is purely my perspective, okay, I think to relate it to the Hollywood situation, it wouldn't surprise me if a big percentage of those people come down here thinking, hey, I'm going to work as a musician while working on my goal to be a songwriter, be a producer, be a clinician, be a whatever within the industry, right? And again, I'm stereotyping and I'm speculating, so please take this all with a pinch of salt. But it wouldn't surprise me if that happens, and then they get into the gig scene down here, realize you can go work on Frenchman or Bourbon or any of those kinds of streets every night. And again, I'm not demeaning that. I do that, okay? But somewhere along the line, forget what their goal was. And so there could be this incredible original scene. And we do have some really good bands. You got guys like John Cleary. I mean, I think he's fantastic. We've spoken about him. You got Tank and the Bangers, and you've got like some really good like bands trying to do their thing. Mm-hmm. But given that like we're living in like this hotbed of musicians, it's interesting that there's not more. Like, how come it's not regarded as a Nashville kind of scene? How come it's not regarded as a Los Angeles kind of scene? Now, listen, that's the only real negative thing I've got to say. The rest is great. The food's great. The people are great. If I had to point out a real, like, oh man, that sucks point of view, I can't believe the amount of potholes. And I grew up in South Africa. So like the fact that there's that many potholes blows my mind. It's like we pay so much tax in this state. Where's that money going? Fix the potholes, people. You know?
The roads are absolutely awful. You are correct about that.
Horrendous.
I will say too, what I love about the city and particularly the people of New Orleans is the resiliency. I mean, what this city has gone through, what the state of Louisiana has gone through, obviously that has nothing to do with them. I mean, just global warming and all that, and these powerful storms that are coming. They're just sitting ducks. It's just so sad that But anyway,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
digress.
and sorry, not to cut you off there, but you know, my wife used to tell me, because she's born and bred here, you know, and she'd go, oh, you know, when I first got here and I was like observing, and I would say, oh man, you know, I think this, I think that, oh, people this, people that, and she'd go, you wait, you'll see these people who you might not think this about, or you might not think, oh, you don't feel like you can relate in this, or she's like, you wait until something happens, all these people will be your best friend. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then when Ida happened, like what, was that last year?
That was 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, well, when Ida happened, I mean, just in my area, man, people were coming out and helping that guy who just lost his roof, and making sure everybody in the neighborhood had plates of food and stuff. And it's like, that's super inspiring to see, man. You know, and I don't know if it's maybe because a lot of people tend to kind of put Louisiana over there and forget about it, you know, that maybe the locals have come together to figure that out. But man, it was really inspiring to see. And for as much of a movement as we're in the world where it seems like no one can get along, that proved that that's not the case, because you had different demographics, different ages, different sexes, all working together to just make sure people were okay. So I don't think the political agenda of, hey, everybody should hate everybody, it doesn't work in that regard, because it's proven. And so, I mean, that was spectacular. I can't say enough good stuff about that, you know?
So let's talk about the new album. It releases June 9th, correct?
Yes, sir.
It is called Prelude. It's a 10-song album. We have heard so far Bipolar Tendencies, which when we first started the interview, you know, kind of talked about, you know, society and kind of where we're at, that kind of 50-50. And that song is really speaking to that, isn't it?
Yeah, trying.
And then, so we have the track that you let me listen to, Blue,
Yeah.
which that saxophone, oh my gosh, like, not to be spoiler, but oh my Lord, like,
Yeah.
talk
Well,
about like,
that's our friend Dave Mouton. He's a musician down there. He played that saxophone part. So big up, Dave.
yeah, wonderfully done, wonderfully, and a nice surprise too, like a nice change up from the first single. So you also had a guest spot with Zach Loy from the band Live. Talk about that connection and how that came about.
Zach's just a really good friend. We've been co-writing songs for it's got to be going on about 3 years now.
Okay.
You know, and so when we were working on this album, I'd taken a couple stabs at a solo for this song called Bones, and I was like, man, I think I'm just too close to this. Like, it's such a dirty, noisy kind of song, and I don't really play guitar like that. I'm more, let me try and make it all pretty and sweet kind of guitarist, you know? And he's just an incredible guitarist. So I was like, I called him up. I was like, hey, dude, I got the song. Would you maybe lay a guitar solo down? And I sent him the song, and about 2 hours later, at least I think it was about 2 hours later, maybe a little longer, but within the scope of time, I had a solo sitting in my email. And I was like,
killer solo, man.
yeah, it's killer. And so I was like, well, sweet. And so I pulled it into the project, and I was like, okay, you know, kind of rearranged exactly where I wanted it, kind of thing. Hit that play button, and I was like, song's finished, you know? And yeah, he's super kind, you know. He was happy to feature on it. He's gonna make an appearance in the video. He's just a cool dude, man, you know.
So are you guys is it more songwriting first or lyrics first and then music, or is it music first and then lyrics, or does it really just depend on the song with this album?
You know, this album was kind of like to just give you a little bit of a backstory here, okay?
Mhm.
I was working on songs for a whole different reason.
Mhm.
And before I knew it, I had a bunch of songs, and the idea of possibly putting a band together started to brew. And I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but if memory serves correctly, shortly after Daniel and I met, I think I was like, yeah, I write songs and stuff, you know, I might have said or something. And do you want to hear them? Or maybe he said, let me have a listen. I can't quite remember, but I know at some point I gave him some songs to listen to. And again, I might be wrong on the wording or possibly the timeline slightly, but again, I know at some point he said to me, again within that time frame, hey, those are cool, we should jam sometime or something like this, right? And again, cut me off if I'm wrong here, dude, because you know my
far
brain,
so good, my brother.
yeah, okay, I don't get much sleep, so sometimes I'm a little
Oh,
blurry
nah.
in details.
I don't know what sleep is anymore. Bro.
but so I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, look, cool, let's jam, man. And before I knew it, we were jamming and practicing these songs. So these songs were kind of finished and good to go without kind of having to think too much about it. Mm. And for me, as a writer, like by myself, I got to be honest, I've never been the, let me write lyrics down, let me write music down kind of guy. I just pick up a guitar and pretty simultaneously words and music come out. It's like David Bowie used to say it, and I'm paraphrasing, so I might have it wrong, but at one point he said, oh, these songs write themselves, I don't write them. I swear to God, as hippie as that sounds, that's 100% true. I don't write these songs. I'm just a vessel. And I'm sorry, my dog's barking because the guy outside decided to start cutting his grass. But yeah, and so anyway, since then we've been working on stuff in a slightly different way. And, you know, sometimes it's a matter of me bringing an idea, playing it for Daniel and going, hey, like, should we work on this? And sometimes we will, or sometimes it'll be an idea and he'll go, hey, what if we move this here and try that there? Or sometimes we'll just be at rehearsal and I'll start jamming something and he'll start jamming something and I'll be like, we're going to turn that into a song. Yeah. So that's kind of where it's at, you know?
Yeah, that's great.
It's not one system.
Go ahead.
There's not just only one system, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been so much fun. I hope that you had as much fun as I did. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Deep Sleep Atlantic. So talk about, we do have a show coming up in June, correct? In New Orleans?
Yeah.
Anything else on the horizon then that you can announce or show-wise or?
There's a couple of things in the books that we're waiting for confirmation on. Okay. You know, there will be more. But yeah, there's a few things happening. I mean, Blue drops on Friday. Its music video comes out the following Friday. Yeah. There's a couple of things here and there in between. Then we got that show. That'll be like a sort of pre-release show. Album comes out, then Bones, the single with Zach, comes out. A week later, the video comes out. We got some plans, you know. Yeah. So if anybody's interested, just, you know, sign up to our newsletter. You can do that via our website, deepsleepatlantic.com, or just follow us on any of the socials. And, you know, we aren't like the type of band that posts 6 times a day, but we post enough for you to know what's going on, you know?
Yeah, I've talked about that with most bands, and like it's kind of a love-hate relationship with social media. You know, you recognize that you're a commodity, so you have to do it, but it doesn't mostly bring you joy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, you know, the argument that I have is it's so bittersweet because we need it, you know, especially for any form of creativity. Like if you want to get it out there now, it's not the old school way of, hey, you've got a podcast, knock on every neighbor's door and try to sell that podcast. You can't do that anymore. I mean, you possibly could, but it's not how it's done. So it's a necessary evil. But what sometimes really strikes me is, so content creation, right? I get it's so important now, you know, because you got more bands and artists and creatives blowing up because of certain content that goes viral. But man, what kind of really makes me think sometimes is, let's say you spend an hour a day creating content. And for most creatives, you're spending more than that. But let's just hypothetically say you spend 1 hour a day. That's 7 hours a week. Imagine you could spend that 7 hours on your music. Like, we'd have some killer music. I mean, not that we don't have killer music, but like there would be some real interesting things. And I'm sure there's people doing that. But again, the twist of it comes in that if they're doing that, they're not creating content, so no one knows they're happy, you know?
Well, and it's forcing you to prioritize too, you know, your time. Where before you could, you know, set that time for music or for, you know, promotion. Now it's more social media.
Yeah.
Well, guys, again, so we had the show June 7th then. The album comes out June 9th. It's called Prelude, 10 tracks. Check it out. Please support these guys any way you can. Locally, if you're obviously in New Orleans or if you're in Louisiana, go see them live. For everyone else, you know, go to Bandcamp, right? Go to your page. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This has been Dogg from the Music Lab podcast. Peace and one love.
Thank you so much, man.
Brother. Thank you.
Absolutely.